On today's program, we will talk with and about some Ball State University professors who spent some summertime in the classroom as students. While Ball State University students were enjoying their summer vacations or working, many members of the faculty were in class, learning to work with the latest in high technology to improve the quality of their instruction. 29 professors attended a computer programming workshop, while 42 professors attended a 2-week telecommunication workshop. One computer workshop participant, Pat Nelson, art professor, has developed a program that will show her classes problems in design and color.
The problem that I've set for myself this session is to computerize a problem that I usually give them anyway. I give them a complicated problem in design that is a combination of working with shape and working with structure and working with color. And it's kind of a problem where they put together a number of things that they've done for several weeks beforehand.
To teach students how to use a computer in historical research, Ray White, history professor, is working on the family in Muncie in the 19th century.
In this particular class that I'm going to be using it in, we're going to be looking at Muncie in the 19th century, the family in Muncie in the 19th century. And so it'll give undergraduate students an opportunity to look at family structure and family makeup, fertility rates of a large number of families using the census materials from 1850 to 1890. So in that respect, it's going to be really beneficial, and it's going to give them an opportunity to do something that they've never done before.
Anne Cartwright, biology professor, is beginning to look upon the computer as a friend and not as an adversary. She has prepared a computer program to show how cells and organisms function, the relationship between DNA, RNA, and proteins.
Well, it's given me the information as to how to program the computer, and I hope how to learn to live with the computer as opposed to kill it. Primarily the workshop has been instruction in how to program using digital authoring language, which is what is on the screen here that I'm trying to make sense out of. These are the instructions to the computer to do this.
Were you familiar with computers before?
Not very familiar. I've done very little with them, and what little I've done, I've primarily learned on my own. I've not taken any computer courses.
Are you beginning to feel more comfortable with the
computer?
Definitely. And how about with the programming? How is this going to help you in the classroom?
Well, if I can get the time, I should be able to write programs like this one that then the students will be able to utilize and give them practice outside of the classroom. For instance, in this one, they'll be practicing the types of things that we'd ask them on a test. And I hope learn from this the relationship between this top line, supposed to be DNA, messenger RNA, and the amino acids that will make up the protein. They have to use a page out of their textbook or a handout that I'll give them to follow the instructions here and fill in the results.
Because some nursing students have problems mixing and administering medicine, Dr. Kay Hodson, nursing professor, has learned to program the computer to help these students learn how to reconstitute a drug from a powder drug to a liquid solution.
I'm in charge of the skills laboratory in the nursing department, and the students have a lot of trouble with one concept where they have to reconstitute a powder drug to a liquid. So my program starts out and it gives them they have received the drug vial from the pharmacy and they have the order from the doctor, and then they're given a series of choices. What do they do next? Do they look in the drug information book? Do they read the drug insert? Do they question their team leader or check with the nurse? So they're given about 10 different choices. And depending on what they choose, For example, if they choose to gather their supplies, then they have to have about 4 appropriate supplies. They go through gathering each one of those, and then they read the drug insert information and determine how much diluent to draw up and how to reconstitute that drug. And so they're given some experience with working with the syringe. And there's 2 critical decision points in the program where they can make an error, where they could draw up the wrong solution or they could give the wrong dosage to the patient. So it's kind of a problem they've had in the simulation laboratory.
Dr. Herbert Stahlke was co-director of the computer workshops with Dr. Lathrop Johnson. Dr. Stahlke is with us to discuss the workshop. Dr. Stahlke, how will the computer workshops improve the quality of classroom instruction at Ball State?
Well, as we saw with the persons who were interviewed in the workshop, we have faculty members now who not only know how to use the computer to teach and how to write programs that will convey these concepts to their students, but they also regard the computer now as a usable tool, something that they can use much as they would have used a blackboard. It's no longer something strange and unusual. It's a part of their everyday teaching practice.
Did many of them have a fear or apprehension of the computer when they enrolled in the workshop?
Oh yeah, that was pretty common. Many of them had little computer experience and were pretty nervous the first time they sat down.
Why do you think the state legislature invested in these workshops?
The state legislature is very much aware that Indiana has a major unemployment problem and needs to move into high-tech fields. Part of doing that is developing a widespread base of people who are capable of using computers, understand how they work, understand even how they fit into our society. And because of that, the legislature has given Ball State an ongoing appropriation to support the development of campus-wide computer literacy.
What will the long-term results be?
I think what we'll see is many more students who will be using the computer not for the sorts of things that it's traditionally been used for, large-scale data processing and so on, but rather using it as an appliance. They'll use it as they'd use a typewriter, they'll use it as they'd use a calculator, and they'll be accustomed to the computer as something that's there in their office and something that's there in their house as a regular aid to their work.
This is the second workshop on computer literacy for faculty that the university has offered. Have you checked to see how the professors are utilizing what they learned last year?
Yes, and in fact many of those professors have used the computer extensively since then. In the spring, Lathrop Johnson ran a weekly workshop for participants in last summer's workshop in which they further refined their skills. And they've been using it to do large-scale testing, to do simulations of social research. It's been used in the teaching of logic. Many of the people who worked on it last year have developed a wide variety of programs now. One of the interesting ones is something that Kay Hodson at Burris has done to teach word formation to students at Burris.
How much background and experience with computers does one need to learn how to write a computer program? That seems like an entirely different field.
Well, one can write a fairly simple program after not a whole lot of experience, but if you want to write something that's going to teach a complex concept and do it engagingly, the sort of 1-month workshop that we just went through is, I think, the minimum that a person can have. From there on, it's a matter of sitting down to the terminal yourself and putting in a lot of time and becoming more familiar with what it takes to get a program running.
Can you get this feeling with the home computers?
You certainly can. The difference between a home computer and what we were working with is often not even significant. We had easier access to graphics, more storage capacity. We didn't have to mess around with lots of floppy disks. But the same sort of instruction that we do with the digital authoring language, you can do on an Apple with Pilot.
What is the biggest problem faced by a professor who sits in front of a computer for the first time?
Fear. The feeling that you have to know everything at once, and when you do something wrong and the computer gives you an indecipherable message that you've broken the machine and it's never going to be repaired. It's a feeling that takes a few hours to get over, but it just stops people cold at first.
Isn't it true that many of the students in their classes are much more knowledgeable about computers, and that's one of the reasons for the workshop?
That's right. And in a sense, we're trying to catch up with our students on this, because they're in a generation that's grown up with video games and grown up with home computers.
Why do you think people from such different disciplines are interested in becoming computer literate?
I think it's an awareness that the computer is a tool now. It's an appliance. It's not simply something for powerful crunching of large numbers. It's an appliance that you use for writing an essay. It's something that you use for doing some relatively minor calculations. It's something that you can use for demonstrating things graphically. We even have speech synthesizers hooked up to them now so we can make them talk. Its applications are so widespread now that people don't feel they have to be in mathematics or the sciences or business to legitimately and productively use a computer.
How important is computer literacy?
It's crucial. Occasionally I'll hear someone say that the computer is the tool of the future, but it's the tool of the present. It's here now. And the exciting developments that are taking place are developments that make the computer behave in more and more human ways. And if we're going to use it effectively, we simply have to have our students and our faculty as familiar with it as we can get them.
I know we touched on this briefly with other questions, but perhaps you have some other thoughts. How do students benefit when their teachers understand the computer?
Well, I think the teacher serves as a role model there. Students also are a little bit nervous about computers, and when they see their teachers using them regularly, they see too that this is a tool they can use. The use of the computer in the classroom can free up a lot of classroom time so that the teacher can give a lot more individualized attention. The student can do a variety of types of guided practice, tasks that the teacher will want records of. These are things that the student can do on the computer and doesn't have to do in class, and that can open up perhaps even 40% more class time for direct teacher-student interaction.
You have some plan for next year?
We're contemplating a workshop for next year. We have not worked out the details on it yet, but we are considering opening it up to people outside of Ball State. I know that there is some interest in the school systems and in other colleges and universities in the state.
Good. Thank you very much. Dr. Herbert Stahlke talking to us about the recent computer workshop at Ball State University. In just a moment, we'll talk to Dr. Robert DeVoe about the telecommunications workshop. Dr. Robert DeVoe, telecommunications professor, is with us to discuss the telecommunications workshop. These workshops are proving very beneficial for faculty, are they?
It is amazing how faculty is realizing their, quote, limitations and trying to expand themselves. It's a healthy indication, I think.
What was the telecommunications workshop for Ball State faculty set up to do?
Well, I think it's a continuation of what you just finished talking to Dr. Stahlke about. New teaching techniques, tools, call them what you want, are coming into the fore. And if we don't upgrade, uptrain people, I think their teaching begins to suffer a little bit. So with the advent recently of that communication and information center that Ball State is planning, there is the possibility of Ball State teaching courses all over the state. This means appearing in media, and with the commitment that the administration has made to that, the telecommunications people thought that one of their strong contributions was to try and teach people how to work in that new environment that they will find themselves in. And so what we tried to do was give them some basic understandings of it, give them some practical hands-on experience with it, hope that maybe they would pick up enough to be able to talk with the experts that produce what they want to do with this new electronic classroom, and then to actually do some things, hopefully, that they could use in the future. Those were the thrusts.
How does teaching on television differ from teaching in the classroom?
Well, let's go back to the tape that was run at the beginning of the first part of this program. In a very few moments, we went into 3 or 4 different situations, had comments from 3 or 4 different people. Now, to duplicate that in a classroom, how are you going to do it? You're either going to have to bring those people in, or you're going to have to do some kind of a field excursion. And you can't go to 3 different buildings in a 1-hour class at one time. And so that's 3 different days to do the things that were done very quickly up there. The advent of media and what it can offer to a person is something that we tried to make them overtly aware of. What does it take to put on one of these? The integration that takes place between the people who are appearing, what has been taped beforehand, how much time to prepare that. It's a time-consuming business the first time. The second time, you have condensed a great deal of work into a small package that you can show.
Why would a professor of mathematics or of elementary education have to learn how to teach on television?
Well, I think mainly because it's out there. We have a information explosion going on in this country that is unbelievable. And it is coming down to us in a great many packages. Computer, for one thing. Film, slides, videotape. All of them with certain bits of information. And the teacher limits himself if he isn't aware of those things and how to integrate them into the classroom. We try to point out to people, look what happens in the conventional classroom when you want to show a film. All right, class, let's stop while we set up the projector, while we pull down the shades, while we dim the lights, and now the students can't take notes of what's going on because it's dark. Or with slides, or with overheads, or with the other media. Now you get into the television classroom, a monitor up in front of the room, and instantaneously, here is some videotape, here is some film, here's slides, here's the rest of it. And a person should know how to work with that. You draw this box around people, and you've put some added importance to what is going on in it. One of the things that we did very early in the workshop was to ask people to give us 4 or 5 minutes of one of their conventional lectures. And for some, it was the first time they had ever seen themselves teach. And that's a revelation to people. The first time you've ever heard yourself on a tape recorder. Is that me? Is that the way I sound? Do I really do that? Now they're getting not only the sound, but the way they are carrying themselves. And some of them grimaced as they watched, and I don't know if they're going to change, but at least they're aware of what they look like in front of the classroom.
Right. Let's show what we've condensed in 60 seconds.
All righty.
And this is your workshop in 60 seconds, but it shows some of the activity that you might explain for us.
Well, the students that were taking the workshop were expected to produce a particular TV module on videotape, something that they could use outside of the classroom, and were further expected in the last 2 days of class to get into a live production for a sustained presentation. And we have some people here who are working on what looks like editing their module, and some people up in the control room who are worrying about maybe the more live thing. And some of the people had some very worthwhile ideas and did produce something that they could use. Some others began to experiment with what you could do, and that was the name of the workshop too, to see just what it takes to put this kind of thing into a package that's presentable.
What are the advantages to a professor to produce his own videotape?
Well, number one, I guess you get exactly what you want as a teacher. There is certain information out there, it exists. You could tap it, but is it exactly what you want? We had one person in history who took, as a little project, the interrelationship between the people during a particular period in French history. Now, in the classroom, he is working with pictures that may be about this size. Thanks to the television camera, we can fill the screen with those and give a parade of people who interacted with each other during a particular period of history and what their contributions were, what was developed by them. And this is something that would have been very difficult to do in the live classroom. So he produced something that brought together a great deal of material that he will not have to do now quarter after quarter, get those books with those pictures, and present something that is timed, framed, juxtapositioned exactly the way he wants it. I think that's the advantage of making your own videotape, is to give yourself a teaching unit that is exactly what you want because you were in control of it.
What exactly can the professors now do after the 2-week workshop that they couldn't do before?
Well, number one, Jim, we hoped that we would give them enough understanding so that they recognized the complications, the time limitations of the total process. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we tried to get them ready to come into the media service at the university and say, I know we can do these kinds of things. I have this kind of content. Can I do this with this? In other words, to talk knowledgeably with the technical people who have to actually do the thing, rather than coming into one of those offices and saying, I'd like to teach something on television, and we have to start at ground zero. We think these people are a good many steps ahead of that and can talk, as I said, knowledgeably with the people who have to actually produce it. And then at the other extreme, go out and do it themselves.
How innovative were the faculty members?
Few people wanted to run before they could walk. That's normal. I think in looking back at the process as we saw it, a serious commitment by most of these people, and in fact they had to indicate how they would be using this in their classroom to qualify for taking the workshop. Beyond that, their evaluation of the whole process was quite favorable. Some even saying, it got terribly jammed up, why don't you make it 3 weeks next time? And that was tremendously encouraging to us, that we did not bore them with this kind of material and they wanted more time to do more things. That's encouraging. We hope that after we assess it and decide what we can do with it, that the administration will look favorably upon it and we can continue it again.
Were there any of those faculty members participating who just flat out didn't get a feel for it, didn't like it?
I think some people looking at their projects found out that they should have done something different, but the comments that we received were quite favorable. In fact, I'm aware of one letter that went out to some people in the administration saying they were sorry that they hadn't taken advantage of these kinds of things earlier. They knew that they existed, didn't know exactly how complete they were, but were happy to have had the experience and wanted to do more with it. So we're getting some favorable attitudes back from them.
We had hoped to have some modules on our program, but couldn't dub from the 1/2 inch to 3/4, which
they
is
worked
technical.
on 1/2 inch.
Yeah, that's a technical problem that couldn't be met. And that's one thing you did teach them, the limitations. That's the first thing you said, was the limitations.
One of the things. Yeah.
Yes.
Remember one person who wanted to show stratifications in society and decided to do it with the types of houses we live in and the types of cars we drive. And he found it very easy to go out and photograph houses and photograph cars, and then sat in front of one of those terminals to edit that business, and you know what editing takes, and found out that, hey, gods, this is a long, involved process. And we're hoping that that was one of the things that they would learn, that if they began to use this media in the class or on a circuit throughout the state, that when they started working with their production assistants, they would not say, hey, I want this tomorrow morning, that they know, I want this next week, and they're going to get a much nicer product when they give themselves the lead times. And the hands-on experience is the only way to do that. You can tell them it's going to take time, and they do not realize.
What were some of the modules produced?
Boy, I think you can almost name it. We had a person who brought in the replica of 2 skulls of Neanderthal man and showed how to decide if one was one or if he was a modern man. We had some people doing some history things. We had a person singing in Italian. We could see, listen to him sing, read the words. We had some sociological things. We had a good deal of art things that were done. We had some actual teaching units on how to put this together or take this apart or assemble it.
Certainly just as diversified as the computer workshop.
I think just about.
Good. Thank you so much. Dr. Robert DeVoe, telecommunications professor at Ball State University, talking to us about the telecommunications workshop. Thank you for being with us.